Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Orchestra Hall. My name is Kira Marie Fox, and I serve as the Visual Arts Manager here at Lakeside Chautauqua. And with me is John Mann, Director of Education. Now, you may be wondering, why isn't John doing the intro today? And it's because this was a collaborative event between visual arts and education with our Gallery Talk series featuring the Dogs of War and Peace exhibit in Hoover Lobby. So without further ado, I'm going to let John do the rest of the intro, but I just want to say welcome to everybody. Thank you.
And today we're fortunate to welcome Jim Mellick to Orchestra Hall. Jim is the creator of the award-winning Wounded Dogs Project, an exhibit that honors military working dogs and the veterans they served alongside. His work has been featured at the National Museums of the United States Air Force, Marine Corps, and Army, and won the grand prize by popular vote at the Art Prize 8 in Grand Rapids. And the exhibit is open Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. till noon and 30 minutes before performances and worship services in Hoover Auditorium until June the 12th. So it's coming, the end is coming, so to speak. But I would ask you would please mute your cell phone ringers if you haven't already, and help me in welcoming Jim Mellick to Orchestra Hall.
Well, I would ask that you don't record or take any pictures, but go ahead and take all the pictures you want so people might remember this to some degree. All right, well, so I kind of want to begin with a homily, something that struck my mind over breakfast. And being at Lakeside has given me new meaning to the term doggy bag. I've never seen so many dogs and humans together. It's like parents at a doggy daycare center. Now, we have become a culturally divided nation. Our college friends from New York City visited our Ohio farm. And we took a walk in the woods along the paths with our two dogs. Along the way, one of our dogs relieved herself on the trail's edge, and we kept walking. "Aren't you going to pick that up?" our friends asked. "It's the farm." And I would say, "Should I pick up the squirrels, the raccoons, and everything else?" But no, I am glad they pick everything up here at Chautauqua, Lakeside Chautauqua. And I've been very dutiful as I've been walking with my dogs in the morning early too. Okay, so we'll move from the scatology part of this lecture to thank you so much for making my wife and I feel welcome during our exhibition and stay at Lakeside Chautauqua. What does it mean to be in the doghouse? And why have I given this title to my visual art? And I asked Google and got, hey, men often find themselves in the doghouse in trouble with their partners due to misaligned communication and emotional blind spots. Causes include forgetting dates, failing to complete agreed upon chores, or letting relationship routines slide. Well, that just sounds like growing old. Feeling that you or your art is in the doghouse is relative to whether or not you want to be in the main house or to be in the mansion. Dog people probably would not see living in the doghouse as an exile. Their dogs, plural, usually live with them. If we agree that the political values of the contemporary and academic art world occupy the big house, then it is possible that art, which is traditional, finely crafted and skilled, patriotic, parabolic, and moralizing with Judeo-Christian values and references, could be seen as being in the doghouse. There is a reason why I do not shy from putting gonads on some of my dogs. Sometimes we just need to mark our territory. While I have no expectations of winning the International Grand Prize by popular vote at Art Prize 2016, I realized the vote was driven by one a love of dogs. 2, the message of patriotism. And 3, fine woodworking and craftsmanship. The dog gives us commonality. I don't know what I can say for cat people. I love my tabby Clancy because he was more like a dog and very loyal and needed to be loved. So before I lose half my audience, I will move on. The court gesture could say things to the king that would get others beheaded. I found humor in my art along with a parable as a means of presenting truth in a subversive way. The problem was that the high art establishment did not take humor in art seriously. How often have comedic movies won an Oscar? I enjoy Gary Larson's Far Side, especially where the dogs are involved. I enjoyed Garrison Keillor's style of storytelling and humor, especially Lake Wobegon and the story of Bruno the fishing dog. That was until he lost his way with success. I recently lost a mentor and friend, Jack Earl, a renowned ceramic sculptor who was also a Christian who lived 25 miles up the road. I felt we had something in common when it came to the narrative storytelling, moralizing wisdom, and above all, the value of humor as it relates to the human condition. His humanizing of the dog brought us closer together. To be honest, I was also given hope with the prices his contemporary fine art could bring. I am at my happiest when I'm working in the studio or have my hands in the dirt. We've always had a garden, even when living in the suburbs. I love preparing the soil, planting, watering, and harvesting, and giving. I hate weeding. Our garden production reached a peak when we had 3 gardens during COVID in 2020. And that year, we were able to donate 4,000 pounds of produce to the food pantry and various senior homes. Of course, my wife and I did all the picking. When it comes to animal allegory, people often ask if I do animals other than dogs, and the answer is yes. Art objects are the visual diary of the artist. They remind us of whom we were with, where we were, and when they were created. Digital photos have allowed me to see a decade of artwork together on one page. And yes, as I approach 80 years old, I see my artistic life in decades by the grace of God and a quad bypass and valve repair at the age of 62. It is possible to see how one's art style has evolved over the decades. From 1985 to 2014, my canine allegory was about humor and historical events and the family pet. From 2015, the canine allegory in history was more about the sacrifice and service of the military canine teams as told through the dog. My process begins with a profile drawing, which takes the patterns for the individual parts to be assembled, such as legs, tail, and head. I do not carve my dogs from a single log. This profile drawing gives me the pattern which becomes the central axis of the sculpture upon which the block parts are built. Blocked up parts of this body are glued and fixed to the central axis and shaped with the legs, head, and tail removed. The legs, tail, and head are shaped separately from the body and then assembled when finished. The tongue and the teeth are often created as separate units and slid into the open mouth. For the color in this case, the cedar is bleached and burned to find a range of color like the German Shepherd dog. The Wounded Warrior dogs were created over a 3-year period. This is the installation of the Wounded Warrior dogs at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in 2019. In these allegories of our wounded veterans, I chose the common breed of dog that served in various wars. The Malinois and the Labrador for the global war on terror, the German Shepherd for the Vietnam War, and the Doberman for the World War II in the South Pacific. The service ribbon for each war is painted on the collar. The first 7 dogs won the award in 2016, and in 2017 I added flashback to represent the psychological wounding of PTSD. People generally did not understand that the Wounded Warrior dogs were allegories for their human counterparts. Many asked if these were actual dogs, and they were not. In 2017, I began to tell sculptural stories of real dogs and humans who served, suffered, or sacrificed together. The new stories that I titled Canine War Stories were much more about the strong bond forged between the human handler and the military working dog in battle. The inspiration for a canine war story came from a book from veterans and former dog handlers. Some were made famous by a book, and some you might never know about if the sculpture was not created. When you move from allegory to reality, you are dealing with real pain and loss. Permission must be gained from surviving family members to tell the story that will be shared with the country. The reward is great to see, and the tears and the smiles of the veteran handler when they see their dog reborn. I met Maureen Schuyler Coleman in 2017 when the Wounded Warrior dogs were exhibited at the Ohio Craft Museum. Schuyler allowed his picture taken with Wounded Warrior dog number 1, who was missing a leg. A few days later, I heard from a friend of the family about how seeing the exhibit affected Schuyler. The family was sitting around the fire pit, and for the first time, Schuyler opened to tell them what happened the day he lost his leg. The story of the Army's Patrick Tutko and his dog Jojo 620, the registration number, was first canine war story, and Patrick's wife Aubrey gave permission to tell the story. Jojo's sculpture and Patrick's story were featured as part of the 2018 Red, White, and Boom celebration, 4th of July in Columbus, Ohio. Patrick, who was depressed, withdrawn, and sheltering, was surprised that thousands cared about his story. Aubrey would later testify that this recognition and appreciation had a great deal to do with Patrick's recovery, both physically and psychologically. Jojo passed over the Rainbow Bridge in Patrick's arms a year later in 2019. In Marie Goodvaja's book, New York Times best-selling book, Top Dog, I learned about the up-the-leash friendship of Marine Master Sergeant Chris Willingham and Army Corporal Corey D. Wines. Sorry. Who they served together in Iraq. The story about the friendship between the two dogs, Luca K458 and Cooper K154, brought tears to my eyes. Corey D. Wines and Cooper were the first canine team killed in action. Luca survived to serve another tour in Afghanistan with Juan Rodriguez, where she lost a leg to an IED. Juan saved her life. Luca was eventually retired with Chris Willingham and went on to fame as a war dog ambassador, even showing up on the YouTube channel this morning. Luca received the prestigious Dickin Medal for Gallantry, which is the Medal of Honor for Animals. My greatest empathy and motivation for telling the story of Luca and Cooper was the sacrifice, service, and the loss of Corey D. Wines and Cooper and other canine teams from Vietnam to Afghanistan who were never given any historical recognition or medals. Always had the thought of surviving family members in my heart while creating the sculptural talisman that may give them some healing and closure. I believe my creation of the likeness of a wounded or killed military dog in a beautiful and restored manner is an act of redemption. It does not intend to glaze over the brutality and the ugliness of war, but to give these creatures some dignity and a new body and a memory that we are willing to turn our eyes to rather than turning our eyes away. The Over the Rainbow Bridge tableau shows Cooper and Luca meeting again. Restored Luca is proudly wearing her Dickin Medal and still missing a leg, which is a symbol of resilience and a badge of courage. Cooper is carrying his favorite toy, a deflated football. The Gold Star's father, Glenn Bine, brought me the story of his stepson, David Sonka, and his battle buddy, Flex. Glenn asked me to help him create a memorial video for all the canine teams killed in action during the global war on terror. I think there was a total around 14. The video has been streamed during exhibitions at several national military museums. Glenn has visited the museums where his memorial is being shown. Airman David Simpson was a Facebook friend and followed the Wounded Warrior Dogs. In 2017, David took his life because of depression combined with the lingering pain from Lyme disease contracted in Iraq. This came as a shock to me. I had to tell the story of David and military working dog Robson L096 so that others might not take their life. The canine story of Airman David Simpson and Robson L096 was unveiled at the opening of the Canine Warriors exhibit at the Air Force Museum. I was pleased when the museum staff was willing to recognize the tragic and darker side of military service and the 22 veterans that take their lives every day due to PTSD. The museum paid for the plane fare so David Simpson's wife and children could fly from Orlando, Florida to see the canine war story of Robson's sculpture. And I was able to spend part of the time of the day with them. The sculpture is titled Waiting to Go. The dog lays on top of a replica of David's battle jacket, and there's no one on the other end of the leash. Through a mutual friend on Facebook, I was able to contact SEAL Team 6 member Will Chesney, who was teamed with Cairo in Operation Neptune Spear to get bin Laden. Will sent all the pictures he had of Cairo as I had his blessing to bring his dog to life. Cairo's sculpture was finished in time to join the other canine war stories at the National Museum of the Army in the fall of 2023. In February of 2024, the Army Museum exhibit was flown to Napa Valley Museum in Yountville, California, home to the largest veterans home in California. In July, the Tug McGraw Foundation paid to fly Marsha and me to the Napa Valley to speak at a veterans event, and that is where I met Will Chesney, and he saw the sculpture of Cairo for the first time. In 2022, I sold the Wounded Warrior dogs and 5 of the canine war story dogs to an art collector and patriot from Michigan and Marco Island, Florida, who promised to always keep the exhibit together as a group and continue touring the exhibit nationally. The new owner, Halcyon Arts of Marco Island, in conjunction with the Tug McGraw Foundation, managed the exhibition at the Napa Valley Museum. Halcyon Arts purchased Cairo to stay with the exhibit and 14 other dogs. While in Napa Valley, Will Chesney mentioned the story that needs to be told is that of fellow SEAL Michael Toussaint and Remco. I vaguely remembered reading about the dog that was killed in an operation to find the deserter Bo Bergdahl, who was captured by the Taliban. The killing of Remco to find a deserter left an open wound in the SEAL community. Will put me in contact with Remco's handler, Michael Toussaint, in early 2025, and for the next few months, we exchanged messages on the progress of creating the sculpture. Remco was unique with a lot of loose skin that stuck out above his vest, and that gave him the nickname of Waddles among the SEAL team members. Remco was unveiled in the Return of the War Dogs exhibit at the Upcountry History Museum in Greenville, South Carolina. But this time, they were all new dogs, as the original group had been sold. Michael Toussaint drove from Texas to meet us in Greenville, where he had an emotional reunion with Remco and placed a couple of patches on his tactical vest. The Remco sculpture still carries those patches that Mike applied. In the next 30 minutes, I would like to share the lighter side of my canine allegory. Not all that I will show will be filled with humor and whimsy, but the earlier sculptures will give you some idea of the context from which the military working dog sculptures evolved. In a world of woe, we need the lighter side, perhaps the far side, to keep our sanity. In the 1980s, I turned to animal allegory to find laughter and beauty again in living. I have always had a dog or two in my life, and sometimes more than one when the cousin dogs were dropped off for daycare. I have shared my lifetime with a variety of dog breeds, from the Chihuahua to the German Shepherd. If I divide my lifetime by 7 dog years, I have experienced the loss of 10 furry companions. They take a big chunk out of us when they die, but they put so much into us. Some people say that humans choose dogs that look like them. It's not so much the look as it is the behavior. If you are a bad person, you will probably have a bad dog. When I talk to my dog, she hears blah, 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 but there is more communication through the eyes. You may think you see the love in her eyes, but all the time she is wishing that you were a better, nicer person and would go to church or synagogue more often. As our best friend, dogs seem to be really good at keeping our secrets, both the good and the bad side of our behavior that they have been watching, just watching. 40 years ago, I came to the realization that our pets have the goods on us and would sell our secrets for a cookie if they could talk. If they could talk, they would tell us who we are as a people and reveal our true character so we can learn to be noble, honest, and courageous people. As an artist, I want to love through my eyes, but I don't always like what I see. It is no good to become strident and angry in my work, because healing art functions best as truth and beauty with a little humor thrown in. There are times that I feel muzzled, yet I am the court jester who must often use dogs to tell truths about our human condition, to make note of troubling events, cultural problems, and shared emotions. My first dog allegory was an installation of 7 stacking dogs. I put a lot of time thinking about that title, and I came up with Stacking Dogs. It was sort of why not and whimsy, but people compared it to the 4 animal musicians of Bremen. I used a lot of literary and biblical references in my art, so I was thinking of the Tower of Babel. In 1985, Reaganomics was a thing, and at the time, so I considered the trickle-down theory of economics as well. What lasted was politics of group thinking. The top dog is the Chihuahua, and the Irish Wolfhound at the bottom is carrying the weight of everyone. Like the animals of Bremen, they are on each other's back to see where they are going, but they are in reality blind, with blinders, and facing in opposite directions. My idea for this piece is a camel is a horse designed by a committee. A few years later, I created Pecking Order. Instead of a top-down management, the dog, cat, and bird are in a symbiotic relationship of support, sort of God's peaceable kingdom. For the next few slides, I will turn from humor to pathos and share 3 sculptures which are heavier in content, in that they document events that move me with some emotion. By documenting these events, I feel that I've given form to the shared feelings of others. Those of us who watched the Space Shuttle Challenger lift off in 1986 know what this image is. In response to this event, I thought about the story of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun and the wax in his wings melted, and he plunged to the ocean and drowned. Somehow, the sculpture titled Da Vinci's Dog, an Italian greyhound in a flying machine, came to symbolize this event, and I wrote, "Come here, Bonetti, come here, boy." Leonardo's Italian greyhound leapt onto the table and came face to face with a giant raptor of wood and canvas. It was a glider constructed especially for him. The sight curled his tail well beneath his delicate frame. Digging his toenails into the table, Bonini spun around and leapt for the open door, just as Leonardo caught him in midair. "It's all right, boy. Nothing to be afraid of. It's just a flying machine. You'll be fine." As the dog sat forlornly, Leonardo lowered the glider onto Bonini's back, and being careful not to hurt the dog, attached the 2 straps behind the chest and the waist. "Wouldn't you like to be a bird for a few moments, Bone? This isn't going to hurt. Trust me." Leonardo lifted his faithful but wimpish whippet to the ledge of the studio balcony and sent him sailing. Bone let out in an audible cry, and as his world spun beneath him, he saw prophetic visions of dogs and monkeys floating in strange, weightless machines of the future time. The Soviet Union launched dogs into flight 71 times between 1951 and 1966, with 17 deaths reported. Many years later, I used Heidi as a model for a woodcut, making the print version of Da Vinci's dog. The dog expresses more fear in the print version, and this is the woodcut plate. Another event that I chose to document was the burning of Yellowstone Park in 1988. Since then, such catastrophic events have become commonplace in California and the western states. Western states. My response that year was to use Disney's Old Yeller as an allegory for the Yellowstone Park, titled The Burning of Old Yeller. Some people, not understanding allegory, and there are a lot of them, were upset that I would light a dog on fire. He is also not eating the tiny bear in his mouth, but carrying it to safety. In 1999, at the end of the Kosovo War, I knew that the mass graves of genocide would be uncovered in Kosovo, as they were in Bosnia. In my research, I could not find a breed and stature of dog from the region to carry the idea, so I used the ancient breed, the Anatolian Karabash, a shepherd's guard dog from the Turkish highlands. I liked the way its curled tail balanced the head in the chosen gesture. I wanted the dog to be weighted and bent low, cautious, and pensive in expression. Its gesture is somewhere between sniffing and pawing at the ground and getting ready to vomit. The body begins to separate like cracked earth. Within the neck and the body are over 100 individually carved figures in various positions of death, as though they were thrown into a pit. I thought about the individuality of each victim, and as I carved each figure. On the first view, the figures look like viscera, bowels of the earth, or a cancerous growth that is invading the belly and the neck. The viewer then sees the convolutions are individual human forms. 20 years later, I came across the image on the right, which must have inspired the details on the left. The image must have been in my subconscious when I created the sculpture in 1999. And I should say that the sculpture witness is it's an example where I'm talking about beauty presenting a very difficult subject. And I use craftsmanship and the fine finishing as a means to tell the story so that people will at least take the story in rather than running in the opposite direction. And this piece is in the permanent collection, the Midwest collection, I think is the title of the collection, at the Evansville Museum of Art in Indiana. 25 years later, I carved the emaciated, starving female dog that obviously had given birth at one time. It is titled Betrayed Afghanistan. This dog is in the exhibit in Hoover. She is branded, blind in one eye, and bleeding with a noose around her neck. It stands over a painted pool of blood in the shape of Afghanistan. The pool acts much like Snow White's mirror, but in this case, the face of the administration that I believe was responsible appears. That is my opinion, and probably my most controversial piece to date, but most veterans on the global war on terror agree with the statement, and that puts me in the doghouse with some. In most cases, I display betrayed Afghanistan dog without the pool of blood beneath. I figure that history will judge how we withdrew from Afghanistan as a betrayal of Afghan American citizens, women, and Christians. Without pointing fingers, most people will agree that the withdrawal was a failure and a betrayal of those who trusted us. Picasso's Guernica was his protest art about inhumanity. Goya's 3rd of May was his protest art about inhumanity, and I suspect these works would also be rejected by judges in a juried exhibition today. And now, parents in the audience, and of course there are no children here, I notice. Now, parents in the audience can breathe a sigh of relief as we will turn to a higher fare. This is written during the Air Force Museum presentation. Part of my canine allegory is to tell the story through the dogs of famous people in history. And if they did not have a dog, I gave them one, such as Darwin. And then I write a fun story to go with them. It is a little known belief that when dogs go to heaven, they are repaired and given a new life and then paired as companions for incoming souls that knew the joy of a dog's company. Sinners stopped at the pearly gates are given cats to accompany them to the fiery pit so that the torment will be certain and they will never have nice drapes or furniture. Atheists who did not believe in a supreme being but tried to compensate by living as morally and ethically as possible would spend eternity listening to ABBA, not God, but the Swedish pop group, riding the elevator between the lower and the upper regions, never being able to get off. Darwin reached the pearly gates, and St. Peter asked him if he had a dog waiting for him. No, said Darwin, but I spent a lot of time riding the HMS Beagle around the Galapagos Islands. St. Peter said, well, all the doubts that you created about the Creator with the origin of the species, you will have to take the elevator for eternity. However, I will put a dog together to ride with you. Darwin thought he at least deserved a monkey. So St. Peter reached into his very large ancient bag of animal parts and began to assemble Darwin's dog. These were spare parts that he had laying around since the great do-over, the great flood. From his bag, he pulled the chassis of what looked like the Dogosaurus Rex, the ancestor of all canines. He gave the body the fangs and the claws of the saber-toothed tiger and the spiked tail and the fin from a dinosaur. Here you go, said St. Peter. Have a nice eternity and watch the tail and the claws. Would you happen to have a cat? Asked Darwin. Now, I don't know if Ramses had a dog named Ramses, but there is a breed named after him, the Pharaoh hound. As the story goes, Moses stepped gingerly over the ground swarming with frogs. He was on his way to a meeting with Pharaoh, hastily called concerning this most recent plague of frogs. Pharaoh's hound, Ramses, greeted him at the gate of the palace. Moses took a second look at the dog, who was indifferent to several frogs on his back, riding him like jockeys on a racehorse. So Moses says to Pharaoh, now are you going to let my people go? And Pharaoh says, hey, these frogs aren't so bad. I've developed a taste for frog legs. The moral of this sculpture is we humans become complacent living with our plagues, our habits, rather than making the necessary changes. We rationalize and become quite comfortable carrying our sins around like a monkey on our back, or in this case, our froggish golems on our backs. Recently, I found this medieval engraving of the frog plague, and there was this little dog with a frog on his back. Another famous person and dog duel was General George Patton and his dog, William the Conqueror. It is said that Patton called him Willie because he turned out to be afraid of his own shadow. Today, I believe it was shell shock that what dog could not have PTSD being paired with General Patton. I simply wondered, since it is sad that General Patton believed in reincarnation, what if we were to reincarnate as Willie, the strongest bond ever? In 1986, my brother, Dr. Gary Mellick, was a captain, an Army captain who worked in the performance laboratory of the Pentagon. Being proud of my art, he sent pictures to George Patton's son, Major General Patton IV, who forwarded the pictures on to his sister. My brother received the return pictures folded in an envelope with the following letter. Dear Captain Mellick, my brother, Major General George S. Patton, retired, showed me the photographs of your brother's carving of a wooden dog purportedly entitled Patton's Willie. Your brother seems to be a talented woodworker, and it is a shame that he should waste his time and talent on such a ridiculous and misnamed piece of work. The sculpture has no resemblance to Willie in any way, shape, or form, and is also degrading to the dog and to our father, who never would have made such a travesty of an animal as to dress it up in toy pistols and imaginary insignia. Willie's eyes were not blue, and his head was not classic, nor did his rib show. To me, the carving is altogether obscene. I am herewith returning the pictures. Sincerely, Ruth Ellen Patton Toden. Little did I know that the humor of Willie would pave the way to giving form to the honor and the sacrifice of military working dogs 30 years later. Well, I still have her letter in my possession. I have it framed at home, actually. Around the time that I created Postman's Revenge, 2 years before the Robo-Dog movie, the RoboCop came out in the theaters, this Robo-Dog was designed to vacuum up all the mean dogs on the mail route. About 10 years later, I revisited the idea of the fake watchdogs that people could put on their front porch as a deterrent to bad guys. 20 years later, after the watchdogs, to keep the deer out of my garden, I made very effective but rough scare deers that also scared off coyotes. Long before I met William Wegman in my New York studio, the Weimaraner breed was special to us. We were godparents to 3 litters of pups from our dogs Holly and Hamlet. We are happy that we kept a female from the last litter. At one time, we had 3 Weimaraners sharing our small house. All of our Weims were named with H names. Hamlet was the dad, Holly was the mom, and Heidi was the daughter. Holly, our late queen mother of several litters, had her whelping box in the basement. When it was time to feed the pups, she would carefully walk into the box, placing her feet in the open spaces between the blind puppies. Once she found an open spot to nurse, she would lay down and the babies made a mad crawl for the back 4, the most productive prime real estate of teats. If a pup is late to dinner and all the teats are taken, I like that alliteration, all the teats are taken, there is also one bully in the litter who is able to swim through the rows of nursing brothers and sisters, causing them one by one to lose their grip on Mama Holly, and that is known as teat surfing. When startled by a noise or visitors coming down the stairs, Holly would quickly stand up and all those hard-fought gains would be lost. One by one, the nursing pups would lose their hold on her teats and drop off with a popping sound, like that. But this time, all 9 of the pups, eyes not open yet, had a good grip and held on like the swinging and the wiggling fringe of a Surrey. Our Weimaraner, Heidi, inherited the height of her father, Hamlet, and the appetite of her mother, Holly. She stood about 2 inches higher than her mother, Holly. Heidi was high maintenance and followed me around the house when she was not sleeping. She was the perfect height for a dining table, and she could easily lay her head on the table without begging. She glanced sideways, awaiting my reaction. The grandkids were easy picking because their food in hand was rarely near their mouths. Their heads knew not what their hands were doing, and the dogs were watching for the perfect moment of interception. In Greek mythology, Daphne's father turned her into a tree to escape the advances of Apollo. Heidi spent so much time at the table that I turned her into one. When Hamlet and Holly died, we adopted and rescued a female yellow lab Weimaraner mix, thinking that Heidi would like a sister. We found out where the B word came from for female dogs. She was always picking fights with her stepsister and was a third larger. Keeping with the H tradition, we named her Hillary. Hillary became better adjusted but still bossed Heidi around. She never accepted being a third smaller than Heidi. She never lost a campaign for our affection. Now, if a dog rolling in coon crap or roadkill is a sin of deception, then getting hosed off is the dog's form of forced baptism. In fact, I wrote a song about the title Roadkill, which is appropriately in a minor key. It goes like this. I am a dog and I like to roll in dead things on the road. Nearly got hit by a car last night, but if the truth be told, roadkill, it's wonderful stuff. It's aged, it's furry, it's soft. What the butchers don't eat is really a treat, and my master will hose me off. Master gave me a bath last night, wouldn't let me on his lap. I'm going to go hunting today, but first I'll take a nap. When I get up, I'll stretch and yawn and then prepare my trap. Varmints will know that I'm a dog after I roll in crap. In 1987, I thought it was funny for the Archbishop of Manila to be named Cardinal Jamie Sim. So I created this miniature greyhound with a drunken cardinal on his back and wrote this short story. Jamie was a cardinal, was a spirit guide and companion for Frankie, the miniature Italian greyhound. Wherever Frankie went, Jamie rode along. Jamie felt safe from the cats, even though some of them were as big as Frankie. They were inseparable, but sometimes Frankie wished otherwise. Jamie loved the berries, especially the fermented ones. The association was often strange when the cardinal ate too many transfigured berries and morphed into a backflipping fool. His transgression was more of a nuisance rather than a mortal sin. Frankie always forgave Jamie once he sobered up. After all, both of them were guilty of a far more deadly sin, being a bad pun. Bird dog. For a moment, she froze in mid-pant with her tongue hanging out. She had not read the book and didn't know that she was an Irish setter, and setters sit or lay near their prey, and were taught that it was not nice to point. If the dog is low to the ground, she does not get caught in the net thrown for the birds. He's got to be around here somewhere, she thought. Just then, a terrible quacking and flapping of wings erupted on her hindquarters. "What the Sam Hill are you doing?" quacked the duck. "I'm a wood duck, not a quail or a pheasant." "OMG, you were right. I am sorry," said the dog. LOL. And then they caught the reflection in the pool. "Say, you know what? We look pretty good together," said the dog. And the duck replied, "Yes, indeed we do. Let's hang out together a while longer." And they did just that, taking selfies and posting pictures of themselves on Facebook. Pet rock. It is understandable why cats are often thought of as female and dogs are regarded as male. I think it has much to do with the cat's independence, or perhaps indifference. Her unwillingness to respond immediately to being called, or her displeasure being held, should not be confused with antisocial stupidity. Likewise, if a cat's show of affection is conditional, a dog will not be considered stupid or inbred because of his blind trust, unconditional loyalty, wet kisses, and emotional expressions of affection. The sculpture of an interacting dog and cat had an alternative title. Rex was having great fun, but Fluffy was not amused. This little French poodle with painted nails is titled Balls in a Box. Moving right along, up on blocks, my idea of retirement. Sam and his daddy before him were moonshine runners, always one step ahead of the revenuers. He knew every coon path in Hazard County, West Virginia, like the back of his tattooed paw. In fact, the back roads of Hazard County were tattooed on his paw, just in case he forgot, which he often did. He could still hear the clanking of mason jars filled with white lightning clanking around in his trunk, and every turn he lost a few flying over groundhog holes. About the time that booze became legal again, he got religion and decided to ride the straight and the narrow. But he soon found himself racing the dirt tracks of county fairgrounds. When you get old, racing becomes more dangerous than leaving your turn signal on. So he decided to hang up the wheels and retire. Now he just sits in the backyard with his mind running in circles. Race horses get put out to stud, he thought. All I am left with are a cool pair of shades. Get out of here. I see you've sunk to drinking your fill at the toilet. Are you getting ready to run that pea-happy crowd from the other side of the tracks? They are a bad bunch. None of them will have respect for where the grass ends and the flower beds begin. When you all get together, you circle up like a bunch of congressmen sniffing each other's butts. In a ritual spiral, you sniff around and around looking for the one dog that will head right off in the right direction or in some direction. Dogs. Over the years, you've defined and reduced me to a single dimension. I'm the dog man, the man who sculpts dogs. Rouault spoke through his paintings of Christ, clowns, and prostitutes. Monet had his haystacks and lily ponds. I have my dogs. For every idea I have swimming above my head, there is a doubt. It is hard to separate the mutts from the show dogs, the ideas with balls and those without. Maybe it is time to turn you all loose. Go on, get out of here. Dog-head characters. The Pointer, Celebrity, Magistrate, Butch, the Seer, the Clown, and Bruno the fishing dog. Ghost Dog 1. Have you ever thought you heard your dog's tags jingle even when he was no longer with you? Maybe you caught a glimpse of him out of the corner of your eye. In the 90s, I created a series of ghost dogs whose backside and front ends were designed to hang on opposite sides of a shared wall. It was not until I received an email from Mitt and Ann Romney in 2012 that I learned that they had purchased this ghost dog in 1995 when he was in New York and before he was governor. He told me that he had it hanging in his cabin, so I did a Google search for Mitt Romney's cabin. If you look closely, you can see the back end of my ghost dog hanging in the Utah cabin. Here are a few sketches. The intellectual, the little dog that ate Paris Hilton, the lawyer, and Farrell. This is one of my favorite commissions titled Shore Dog. It memorializes 4 dogs that enjoyed staying at a cottage on Lake Michigan every summer. Such private commissions provided income since the dogs of the Wounded Warrior Dogs project and the Canine War Stories were not for sale individually. Buddy, E158, is a commission of a beloved retired TSA detection dog. The hair pattern of the chassis was very much a challenge for me. Beagle Boy Blue was the first time I drew on the dog with an acrylic pen to get the salt and pepper bristled hair effect. This English bulldog, Stella, who lived in Connecticut, was a new challenge, but it was very rewarding. For several years, a friend had been asking me to memorialize her first dog, a female German Shepherd named Liebchen. She asked to have it presented as a ghost dog, and this may be my last dog carved. And now I think it is time to go. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. Yeah. Do you have any questions? I can entertain maybe a couple of them. All right, I see some familiar faces from our last gallery talks. Glad to see you here again today.
I've got a couple.
Yeah.
First of all, it seems like there's a lot of math and engineering that goes into your creations.
Yes.
So I'm interested in your background. Secondly, where do you get your wood? And thirdly, how long does it take you to create, for instance, one of the war dogs?
Okay, so I'm going to probably start with the last question first. Between 150 to 250 hours for the creation of the dogs. My woods are indigenous Ohio woods. I sort of began to have a stash of lumber and stacked lumber. I don't work from logs, but more of a furniture approach to creating these things. And I think that I have enough wood. I'm just wondering, like, Sam Mayloff at the age of 86, he was a furniture maker in California, and he thought he had enough commissions, probably would last him the rest of his lifetime. But I wonder myself sometimes whether or not I'll be able to use up all the lumber that I have in storage, that I carry around. Now, what was your first question?
What's your background? What your background is, because...
Well, I went to, I suppose I would have been a biology major if I weren't an art major, but I had at Greenville University, I had a combination of sociology and as an art major, so it kind of, observing people and, and putting it to art. My background then is also a full-time artist and then as a faculty teaching art at colleges such as up in New Hampshire, then Houghton College in Western New York, and then came back to Columbus. Then I taught at Calvin College for a couple of years, and I spent my last 6 years, retired at the age of 72, I think it was, from Cedarville University in Ohio. I taught there for 6 years. So yeah, educator, artist, observer, Christian, preacher's kid. That's sort of the background on that. Anything else? Well, thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim.